Okay, so we're going to move straight on from our Twitter login screen to a user list where we can follow and unfollow users. So for that, we're going to need a new activity. So file, new activity from the gallery, and I'll choose the empty activity. And this is going to be a fairly simple activity. With just a simple list view there we go, taking up the whole screen. Alright, now let's populate our list view. So I'll start by creating an array list of strings for our users. And temporarily, I'll just add a couple of users in there. So we'll have Rob and Kirsten. And then we'll set up our list view. We'll just call it list view. And this is going to be a list view from find view by ID, and r.id.listView is our ID. And then to allow the checkboxes, we use list view and then set choice mode. So this allows users to choose items on the list, and we want them to be able to choose as many as they like. So we're going to use choice mode multiple. And you can see there's a number of other modes there that we could use, but we want them to have the ability to follow as many people as they like. Okay, then we're going to take our array adapter and we'll call it array adapter. And then we'll set it up here. New array adapter. Using this as the context. And this time we're going to use android.r.layout. But instead of simple list item 1, we're going to use simple list item checked. And that will give us a tick at the end of each row, which the user can select or deselect. And as usual, we'll assign the user's array list to the array adapter. And then we'll take our list view and set the adapter to it. Okay, we're almost ready to go, but a couple of things before we run this app. First, we're going to add an on-item click listener, which will allow us to do something when each individual row is selected or unselected. So we do that firstly in the normal way with a list view and an on-item click listener with a new adapter view.onItem click listener. And then we get the row that was tapped using a checked text view. We'll call it text view, and this is going to be a checked text view. And we're going to get it from the view variable up here, which is essentially the table row that was tapped, or the list view item. And then we can use checked text view dot is checked to see whether or not it's checked. And then we'll just log row is checked. If it is, or if it's not, row is not checked. There we go. And then the other thing we need to do before we run the app is actually set up the redirect when the user is logged in. Otherwise, we'd never see the new activity. So I'll set this up as a method. Redirect user, And I'm actually going to check whether the user's logged in the redirect method here. So if parseUser.getCurrentUser is not null, then we'll create our intent, which will be a new intent using the application context, and we're going to redirect to main to activity.class. And then we just start that activity. There we go. And then we can call that in a number of places. So first, when the user is logged in. Second, when the user is signed up. And third, we can just call it on the onCreate method, which will then check if the user is logged in, and if they are, it will redirect them as well. And one other small thing, I'm just going to change the title to user list. All right, so let's give that a try. As we logged ourselves in the previous video, we should already be logged in, and it should redirect us immediately to the user list, and we should see Rob and Kirsten with a tick, and we can either select or deselect them by tapping on each row. Let's take a look. And here we go. You can see we've got the checkboxes currently unchecked. If we tap them, then it's selected, and we get our row is checked method as well. Super. So that's a nice, easy way to select and deselect rows of tables. Now, all that remains for us is to synchronize this with parse, so we get obviously the correct parse users, and also that the selecting and deselecting is synchronized on parse as well. All right. So let's start off by getting our users. And to do that, I'm going to jump over to Firefox for the parse dashboard and just add in a couple of users. So we'll have Kirsten and a password. And let's have a couple more. Tommy with a password as well. And we don't want anyone to feel left out. We'll have Ralphie. There we go. So now we need to do a user search to get all our users. And we'll do that here. So I'll just get rid of the users that we had. And then down here, we'll set up our parse query. This is going to be on parse users this time. And it's parseUser.getQuery. And the only thing we want to specify is we don't want to show the current user in this list because they don't want to follow themselves. So we'll add where not equal to, and we want the username. Just make sure, yep, there it is, the username. And we want that not equal to parseUser.getCurrentUser.getUsername. And then we're going to run our query. So find in background with a new find callback. And of course, we'll do our check to see if E is null. And then we'll check to see if we've got some objects. There we go. I'm not going to add in any error messages there, but you're welcome to if you want to. And then all we need to do here is loop through the object list, which is a list of parse users. And then we'll add them to the users array list. And we want to add user.get username. There we go. So one more quick thing, I'll just clear users in case it's got anything saved in it. And then finally, when that's done, we just update the array adapter by notify dataset changed. Okay, so let's just have a quick look. We should now be able to see all our users apart from the current one. So we should see Ralphie, Tommy, and Kirsten. And there they are. Super. Now, of course, I can select and deselect them here, but that's not saved on parse in any way. So let's change that. Now we're going to need a system to keep track of who is following who. So I'm just going to jump over to our parse dashboard and have a quick think about how we're going to save this data. So we want to be able to easily keep track of who our current user is following, and then be able to get all of that information in one go when we bring together the tweets, all the users that our user is following. So I think the easiest way to do that is going to be to create an is following column, which will be an array or a list of items. There we go. So then, when the user checks a box, all we need to do is update the current user, and we're going to get a list or an array, and the list that we're going to get is called is following, and we're going to add to that the username of the user that they followed. So that's users.get, and then we want to get the one that was tapped, so that's I. There we go. And then we'll just save it in the background. We don't really need a callback for that. And then very similarly, when they uncheck the row, then we'll remove that user. So users.get I. There we go. So let's have a quick look at that in action and make sure that that works. And here we go. So let's tap on Kirsten. Aha! We get a nasty crash. Now, some of you may have anticipated why we got that crash. Let's have a quick look. Find what the message is. Right, we're trying to add to a null object reference, i.e. we're trying to add to the isFollowing list, but we haven't created that list in the app yet. So to get around that, what I'm going to do is check to see here whether or not the user has the isFollowing list attached to their current user object. So we can do that using if parseUser.getCurrentUser.get and then isFollowing, and we can test to see if that's null, and if it is, then we'll create a new list for them. So we'll have a list of strings, and I'll just call it empty list, and it's going to be a new array list in the usual way. And then we'll take our parseUser.getCurrentUser and we'll put the isFollowing array as empty list. And now we should be able to add to the isFollowing array when the user taps on one of the rows because it is there. We could save that to pass, but we don't really need to, because if by any chance the user doesn't follow anyone here and then comes back to this page, it will just add the is following array back into the current user anyway. So let's try that again. Here we go. So we'll tap on Kirsten and it hasn't crashed. That's a good sign. Let's do a quick refresh of our user class. And you can see that Rob is now following Kirsten. Excellent. So that looks promising. Let's just check a couple more. So if I choose Tommy and Ralphie and then deselect Kirsten, I should just be following Tommy and Ralphie. And there we go. Tommy and Ralphie are now being followed. Great. So we're almost there then. The final thing that we need to add in for this video to complete our user list is that when the user opens up the app, it shows the appropriate people already ticked. So we'll do that down where the table is created. So that's here. And we can do this by checking for each of the users in the users array list whether or not they're in our is following list. So we'll loop through the array list, the users array list that is, and this is going to have a bunch of strings in it, which are all usernames. And we'll call it users. And then for each of them, we're going to check that our user is following them. So we're going to look at pass user.get current user. And then we're going to get the is following list. And we want to look to see if that contains the, in fact, I'll call it username rather than usernames. We want to see if that contains the username, and if it does, then we'll check the box. So we'll do that using listview.set item checked. And the item that we want to check is the location of the username in the users array list. And we can get that using users.indexOf and then username, and then we add in either true or false depending on whether we want it checked or not. And if it does contain that username, we want it checked. So let's have a quick look. We should now see that when we restart the app, it will restart with Tommy and Ralphie already selected. And there we go. So we now have our user list that behaves exactly as we'd want. It allows the user to check or uncheck individual users to follow them or not, and that is saved on our pass server, and when the user reloads the app, it reloads the correct information. Okay, so we're doing pretty well. Our next step is to allow users to actually post tweets, and we'll do that in the next video.